Fridays. My name's Al McCauley, and today I'm going to talk to you about something that the church collectively calls the three theological virtues. And I want to do it through kind of like a piece of art that comes to us from the famous American lithographers Currier and Ives. And this piece dates back to 1874. And what you see is three women who are basically the embodiment of the three theological virtues, which are faith, hope, and love. And I want to say at the outset that they're displayed as women, and this is not unusual, all the way back to ancient times in Greeks, all the way through the Renaissance into our current time. When you're talking about things like the virtues, which are, thoughts, which are feelings, which are emotions, all that kind of stuff, we typically attribute them to females. And in the Christian context, this is very true. And part of the reason for that is we look at Mary, who was a woman, and we see her as the embodiment, the ultimate example of virtue. And so when we're talking about these particular virtues, for instance, faith, hope, and love, we see that Mary is probably the par excellence example of that in history. And so these virtues are embodied as women. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about that. Now, before I go any further, let me explain that the three theological virtues are not just pulled out of thin air. They're scriptural. And in fact, all three of them are mentioned in Scripture individually as well. But collectively, we think about St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verse 13, where he says, faith, hope, and love remain, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And so we take that to its heart. We say scripturally this is important. And the Catholic Church has weighed in on this. They've said as much in the Catholic Catechism, calling the theological virtues the foundation of all Christian morality. In fact, they're the virtues that inspire, that are infused into our souls, the souls of all the faithful, so that we can be capable to act the way we're supposed to act as Christians, that we're supposed to be children of God and live a meaningful life. And so these theological virtues help us to do that. So let's parse this out a little bit and take a look at this. If we look at, let's start in the middle, because it's faith, hope, and love. That's the way Paul lists them. Let's look at these three women. Faith is represented by the middle woman. And you'll notice a few things right off the bat. Number one, she's holding a cross and a Bible. The cross, which is the ultimate emblem of our faith, and the Bible, which is where we get the stories of our faith from the likes of Old Testament heroes, but certainly in the New Testament of Jesus Christ. The other thing she's doing is she's looking to heaven, and this is what faith is. It's this idea that enables us, this virtue that enables us to believe in God and everything that he's revealed to us, not just through the word of Scripture, but through his lived example. And I might add throughout the centuries with the lives of the saints and the teachings of the church, etc. But this is an important point to remember. Faith is not mere superstition. It is both intellectual and it is emotional. And it's the combination of those things that we need to understand. And St. Paul weighs in on this and talks about faith in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, when he says, by grace you have been saved, and by faith, remember this faith is not from you, but it's from God. And so all faith, any faith that you and I have is really a gift from God that's given to us. And this is important, and it kind of goes back to what I said about the intellectual and the emotional part. We have faith in God, in the Creator, not the creation. We have faith in the lawgiver, not the law. Too often, I think in our own current time, we get enamored with creation and we think that there's something divine about it. Certainly it comes from the divine, but this goes back to St. Augustine. He used to say that we need to love the Creator, not the creation. This is, when we don't do that, that's idolatry. It's idol worship. So faith is very important that way. Let's move on to hope. When you're looking at this picture, this lithograph, hope is represented on the left-hand side. She's also looking up to heaven a little bit, but you'll notice her hand is over her heart, as if to say, I have to do something. It's not just about what I believe, it's also how I live. And I like to say when I would define hope as faith in work clothes. It's really where the rubber hits the road. And it's this idea that helps us to remember that if I have faith in something and I live it out, I can face any adversity. I can face any shortcoming I have, or I can face any persecution that comes my way, any dry time, any mockery, anything like that, I can face because I have hope, which is lived faith, more or less. And we see this biblically in the letter of Hebrews, chapter 6, verse 19. Very famously, we hear about how hope is this anchor of the soul. And so, again, back to the lithograph, if you notice, the woman, as you look at it on the left, that represents hope, she's holding an anchor. And that anchor is something that we can't see. when it's being used properly, we can't see it. It's under the water. It's unseen, like our God is unseen. But it holds us still in the times of storms, in life's storms. So hope is that thing that can really be the anchor of our faith, of our lives. When things go wrong, we can have hope in God, in those things that we believe in those things that we have faith in. Which brings us to the third and final of these theological virtues, which is love. And this is considered the highest human calling, the greatest gift that we can get from God. You know, Jesus gave us two commands, love God and love your neighbor. And that's what we're called to do. And it's interesting that the English word that we use, charity, comes from the Latin caritas, which means love. And so I think today in the modern mind, we think of charity as, I'm going to give money to a worthwhile organization, or I'm going to donate my clothes or whatever. And that's true, but we should be doing it. The intention with which we do those things should be love of neighbor. Caritas is love of another. And so when you look back at this lithograph, you'll notice on the right-hand side, love is portrayed. And of the three, she's the only one that's not looking up. She's looking out into the world. She's looking at other people. And in fact, to emphasize this point even greater, she's extending her right hand. She's extending her right hand as if to help others. And she's doing this because of love. And that's represented in her left hand, the heart that's on fire, the passion that she has to live out her faith in hope is the love. That's the ultimate consequence of it. And it's other-centered. Love necessarily has to be other-centered. It can't be just about love of self and what I want and getting my way. John's gospel says this, chapter 15, verse 12, when Jesus says, "This is my commandment, love one another as I have loved you." And so that's really what we're called to do, to live these theological virtues. So when we think about this, I would ask you to think about a few lessons just relative to each of these virtues. You know, I think about faith. When have I truly needed to rely on my faith? One of those times that I've really needed to trust in God. Something to think about in your own life. In terms of hope, who's demonstrated hope in my life? Who has been that person who lives their faith, who it's faith in work clothes, and who that power of hope in their lives, and to whom can I be maybe that example of hope to others? You know, who can I demonstrate that virtue to others? And lastly, who do you know that is most in need of your caritas, your love? You know, it's easy to say I'm going to go to a soup kitchen or I'm going to go to a food bank. That's easy in a way. It's a lot harder to love those people closest to us sometimes, isn't it? Our family, our neighbors, close relatives, people we go to work with or we go to school with. Those people sometimes can be the hardest people to love, and yet we're called to do that, to apply our faith and our hopes so that we can live out that greatest commandment that Jesus gave us, not just to love God, faith and hope, but to love others, which is love, caritas. So anyway, theological virtues. Hope this has been helpful. If you'd like to share this content, that would be great. We would love it. We would also be grateful if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. But either way, we hope you will keep tuning in every Friday for Fish on Fridays. Until next time, please be good to each other and God bless.